The sky over Idris 9 never changed. It rolled in endless shades of gray, thick and low like bruised skin stretched across the bones of a dead world. Lightning danced inside the clouds, blue veins across the sky, but no thunder followed only. Silence, the kind that made sound feel like intrusion. Ash fell like memory, coating the crumbled walkways, softening the sharp edges of shattered glass and steel. Calder Vane stirred the pot on his stove with mechanical rhythm, his hand moving without thought, the same way it had moved every day for the past 5 years. The stew hissed, a thin soup of protein gel and powdered grain, the last of the weeks. Ration Prince stretched into something edible. He didn't look up. The storm had become part of him now. He wore it in his breath, in the weight in his shoulders. The food stall, really just an old freight container, wedged between two buckled office towers, was sheltered by a tarp, bolted to the broken masonry above. Its edges snapped against the wind like distant gunfire. He kept the fire low, the canopy taut, and his eyes on the pot dot, so when he finally looked up, it was because the silence changed. There was movement, not the quick, purposeful flicker of scavengers or the cautious shuffle of traders. This was slower, staggered, a shape emerging from the gray veil of ash and steam, weaving slightly, as if each step required negotiation with gravity. Calder's eyes narrowed. Most who made it this far had nothing left to barter. Some begged, some threatened. Some offered themselves with eyes already hollowed out. This one was different. She stepped into the dim light cast from his stove, and Calder's breath caught not from beauty, though there was something striking in her even now, but from what she carried. A child, wrapped in a stained thermal blanket, too small and too still. The woman's skin was a muted green hybrid, mottled with bruises and cuts. Her hair was silver white, drenched and matted to her shoulders. What remained of her clothing clung to her body, like memory, one torn strip at her waist, another at her shoulder. Barefoot, bleeding from the left heel, she moved like someone who had already fallen a dozen times and decided the next fall didn't matter. She stopped in front of him. Her eyes lifted. They were violet, ringed with red from exhaustion, and filled with something he recognized. Not hope, not fear, just a hollow kind of resolve. "The only thing I have left is my body," she said. Her voice cracked like splitting glass. "Please, feed my daughter. Tonight, my body is yours, human." Calder didn't blink. She wasn't trying to seduce. Her body shook. She swayed slightly, but she didn't lower her gaze. She wasn't bartering. She was breaking. He looked at the girl, small, too thin, her lips a shade too blue. He turned silently, scooped stew into a small ceramic bowl, and stepped around the stall. Kneeling, he placed it in front of the child. First, his voice, when it came, was low and steady. "She eats. Then you come inside." The woman blinked. Her weight shifted backward instinctively, as if she expected a blow for misunderstanding. "I don't have anything else," she whispered. "I heard you," he replied. She didn't move. "Get her warm," Calder said. "Talk later." The girl took the bowl with tiny, trembling hands. Her eyes, dull and too old for her face, lifted to meet his. She didn't flinch. She just watched. Then she began to eat. Calder opened the gate to the side stairs. Inside, before the wind picks up, the woman hesitated, then gathered the child gently into her arms. Her legs buckled as she stepped forward. He didn't reach to catch her. She steadied herself and climbed. Inside, the air was warmer. A small heater buzzed beside a cot with a thin mattress. Calder set another bowl on a crate by the heat. He didn't speak. The woman laid the child down, unwrapped the wet blanket, and began drying her with slow, practiced hands. Calder handed her a towel, then stepped back, She looked up. "Why?" she asked. He folded his arms. "You said she needed food. That's enough." She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "No one's ever said that." Calder didn't reply. Outside, lightning cracked. Inside, a bowl emptied. A child exhaled, and for the first time in too long, a stranger wasn't taken, wasn't touched, just fed. Asterisk, the heater's low hum filled the silence like breath. Not loud, not comforting, just proof the grid hadn't died yet. Calder sat by the far wall, his back against a support strut, arms folded across his chest. He watched the woman dry her daughter with the kind of deliberate care that only desperation sharpens her movements, slow, methodical, never jerking or rushed, as if speed might break the child more than she already was. The girl lay, he'd heard her murmur, once curled beneath the towel without protest. Her limbs were thin, wrists like reeds, knees drawn to her chest under the shirt Calder had offered. It hung from her shoulders like it remembered someone bigger. She hadn't spoken again, just watched, quiet, still. Her mother finally eased onto the cot beside her, pulling the thin blanket back over both of them. She didn't lie down, didn't rest. She sat upright, arms wrapped loosely around her legs, gaze fixed ahead, not at Calder, not at her daughter, just somewhere beyond the steel walls. "You haven't slept?" Calder said, not as a question. She blinked. Her voice was barely audible. "I didn't think I was allowed to." He didn't answer right away. He watched the steam rise from the near-empty stew bowl. "You're allowed," he said finally. "This isn't a shelter." She looked at him now, really looked. Eyes red-rimmed and wary, not with fear, but with something older, like she'd been held underwater too long and didn't trust the air. "Then what is this?" Calder thought about it. "A pause," he said, "not a promise. Just a pause." She nodded once, slowly. "I used to think, if I just kept moving, we'd be fine. But moving turned into hiding. Hiding into begging. And after that..." Her voice cracked. She didn't finish. Calder didn't press. "I thought I'd feel safer here," she whispered. "But I still feel like if I stop, I'll disappear." "You won't. That easy, huh?" "No," he said. "But it starts with someone not taking." Her throat moved as she swallowed. Then softer. "My name is Nisari." He didn't shift. "Calder. We came from Grid Line 7, she said, her words still tentative, still uncertain if talking. "Was a trap. They closed the access tunnels. Non-citizens had to resettle, but no one said where. They never do. I tried the shelters." Her voice was dry. "They're full. They always are." Nisari looked down at Lay. The girl had fallen asleep, one hand wrapped around the fabric of Calder's shirt like a tether. Her small mouth moved slightly, but no words came this time. Just breath, deep, even. "She hasn't spoken in 2 days," Nisari murmured. "Before tonight, the only word she'd say." She hesitated, then looked up. "Safe." The word hung in the air like a confession. Calder looked at her, eyes steady. "She said it when I gave her the bowl," he said. "Didn't know what she meant." "She meant this," Nisari said. "The warmth, the quiet. You." Calder didn't answer. He stood instead, walked to a storage crate, and knelt. From within, he pulled a thin ration bar and a nutrient pack. He set them on the crate near the heater. "For the morning," he said. Nisari's eyes followed his movements. Her body still upright, but not tense anymore, just tired. Bone deep, years old tired. "I thought you'd take me once I fell asleep," she said suddenly. Calder didn't flinch. "I didn't." "I know," she said. "That's why I didn't." He turned to the sink, poured reheated water into a metal cup, and handed it to her. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "Drink," he said. "You're dehydrated." She sipped slowly, half the cup, then looked at him. "Give her the rest," she said. "She'll need it." Calder took the cup without argument, poured again, and set it beside the cot. There was a long silence after that, not strained, not awkward, just a new kind of quiet, one where neither had to explain why they hadn't left yet, where no one owed anyone anything. Nisari watched her daughter's chest rise and fall, then looked at Calder again, not guarded, just awake. "You're not what I expected," she said. Calder sat back down by the heater. "I'm not here to be expected." And neither of them said anything else, because sometimes surviving didn't need answers. Just a room, a heater, a meal, and the kind of silence where no one took what wasn't offered. Asterisk, the morning on Idris 9 came not with sun, but with a shift in the light, a dull brightening of gray ash, through the fractured glass of old rooftops and torn scaffolding. There was no birdsong, no rustle of leaves, only the distant hum of half-dead infrastructure fighting to stay alive, and the slow, wheezing breath of a city that had long since stopped trying. Inside Calder's shelter, the heater was still warm. That meant the batteries held through the night. That alone felt like a small miracle. Calder stirred where he sat, back aching from the wall, one arm asleep beneath him. He stretched slowly, careful not to move too fast, and turned toward the cot. Asterisk was still asleep. She lay curled into her mother's side, wrapped tight in the thermal blanket, Calder's oversized shirt still hanging over her limbs like a protective shield. Her tiny mouth was parted, one hand resting against her mother's ribs. Nisari hadn't moved either, but her eyes were open, watching him. She didn't look startled or afraid. She just studied him with a stillness he'd come to recognize, not silence out of fear, but the kind people learned after too many years of never being believed. Their eyes met. "I thought you might take me once I fell asleep," she said. Her voice rough from the dryness in her throat. Calder didn't blink. "I didn't." "I know," she said. "That's why I didn't sleep." He stood, shaking the numbness from his arm, and moved to the corner where a salvaged solar kettle sat on the warmer. He poured half a cup of water and held it out. "Drink," he said. Sat up slowly, not to protect herself, but to reach for it without disturbing Lay. Her fingers brushed his as she took at dry skin against warm palm. She sipped, then stopped halfway through. "Give her the rest." He nodded, poured again, and set the cup beside the cot. Calder crouched by the crates, pulling out a nutrient pack and a thin ration bar. He laid them on the edge of the counter. Nisari hadn't moved. She was watching again, but now something had shifted in her posture, less ready to run, less braced. He didn't speak. Finally, she did. "You don't ask anything. You give food, water, a room. Why?" Calder didn't look up right away. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "Because," she said the word safe. That word doesn't get said much here. Nisari's lips trembled, not from fear, just from the weight of it. That someone had heard the word. That someone had cared what it meant. "I worked textiles before the collapse," she said. "Color work, decorative, useless now. We were. Zairi, my mother's side, artisans." Calder nodded once. "I remember that line. Zine-Allen hybrids. Popular once. No one needs beauty anymore," she said. "Maybe," he said, "but people still need to feel human." She looked at him. Really looked. "And you? What did you do?" "Supply coordination. Planet-side distribution. Back before the grid. Collapsed. I stayed after the outer sectors were cut off." "Why?" He shrugged. "Someone had to finish counting." She smiled then. It was small, but it reached her eyes. "I haven't smiled in a long time." He didn't return it, but his shoulders relaxed, just slightly. On the cot, Lay stirred. A soft noise, a breath. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked up at her mother first, then across the room at Calder. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. Away. She just whispered something groggy and clear. Warm. Nazari reached down, brushing her daughter's curls gently. "It's morning," she whispered. "You're safe." Lay blinked, then sat up, still wrapped in the too large shirt. She looked at Calder again, studying him. No fear, no confusion. Just a child's silent understanding. He moved to the small stove, adjusted the heat coil, and placed the pot on top to re-warm the stew. The familiar hiss filled the room. Nisari watched him, then stood. "I want to help," she said. He paused, glanced back. "You don't have to." "I know," she replied, "but I want to." She moved to the basin and began scrubbing the used bowls from the night before. Her sleeves rolled back, fingers steady. Calder watched her for a moment, then returned to the stove. Something had shifted. They weren't guests anymore. They weren't strangers. There were three people in a room that was no longer cold, no longer emptied out, just quiet and full. Asterisk, the storm didn't let up, but the air inside the shelter no longer felt borrowed. The heater's glow pulsed softly across. The walls bouncing off crates and steel panels patched with Calder's careful hands. Ash still blew past the outer canopy like snow without purpose, but inside, warmth had shape now routine. Rhythm and voices, however few. Lay stood at the edge of the work crate, her knees on a folded blanket to give her height. Her small fingers held a socket tool, oversized and awkward, but she turned it with determined precision. Calder knelt beside her, guiding her hands without hovering. "That's your ground line," he murmured. "Don't over-tighten. You strip it, we lose the print cycle." "I won't," she said quietly. Her voice was steadier now. She spoke in full sentences, sometimes even questions. It still startled Nisari when she heard it how much her daughter had hidden behind silence. How quickly she'd begun to bloom. In it, across the room, Nisari stitched one of Calder's damaged thermal sleeves with twine from an old salvage kit. Her fingers moved with the ease of someone who once embroidered story cloths, before all the galleries closed, before her partner sold their housing code for food and left her flagged, unregistered. She wasn't hiding behind her wrap anymore. She wore it like a robe now, loose, layered, stitched back into something that felt like choice. Her hair had dried in soft waves, loosely tied with a length of thermal fabric. She smelled faintly of ration soap and metal, not the cloying chemical. Stench of desperation, but the clean scent of someone who had space again. Calder stood and brushed metal filings off his gloves. He watched the two of them without smiling, but his eyes didn't carry the same stillness as before. He moved with less guarded weight. He crossed to the stove, stirred the heating pot, and glanced back at Nisari. "You trust me with the food now?" she asked, arching an eyebrow, teasing gently. "I trust your hands not to waste it," he said without looking up. She smiled real this time, dry but soft at the edges. "That's the closest thing to a compliment I've had in months." "You're still not getting the stove?" "I didn't ask." They shared a look, quick, knowing, familiar now. Nisari stood, stretched her arms overhead. The loose wrap shifted across her hip. She didn't adjust it. She wasn't performing. She was simply moving in her own body again. She crossed the room and caught sight of a split along Calder's knuckle. "When did that happen?" "Yesterday. One of the crates." "Didn't notice." "You noticed. You just ignored it." He didn't argue. She pulled the med patch kit from the bin, nearly empty now, and gently took his hand. His fingers tensed, not from pain, but contact. Her touch was warm, careful. She cleaned the wound, pressed a seal strip into place. Her thumb lingered an extra second. You're bad at taking care of yourself. I take care of the stall. That's not the same. She let go slow. He didn't pull away. Across the room, Lei watched. Her eyes shifted between them, and then she spoke. Are you friends now? They both turned, blinking. I don't know yet, Asari said, crouching beside her. But I think we're trying. Lei tilted her head. Can I stay if you're? Friends? Calder answered this time. You don't have to go. Nissari's eyes flicked to him. Not even if things get harder? She asked. I'll adjust. She stared at him, sharp and unblinking. Testing. Why? He looked back at her. You know why. She didn't reply. After the meal, Lei helped fold the thermal blankets, while Calder rewired a busted signal relay. Nissari wiped ash from the heater vents. At one point, she crouched, one leg stretched behind her, the hem of her wrap riding high across her thigh. She didn't pull it down. She wasn't inviting. She simply wasn't afraid. Later, she stood by. The door, arms folded. I have a request, she said. Calder looked up. Not payment. Not barter. Just a request. He waited. I haven't seen my reflection in months. Do you have anything I can use as a mirror? He walked to the crate near the sink, pulled out a polished metal panel, dented, bent, but still reflective. She took it with both hands, stepped into the angled light, and lifted it. Her breath caught. She touched her cheek, her jaw, the corner of her mouth. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I look older, she whispered. You look like someone who made it, Calder said. She lowered the mirror, walked back, and stood in front of him, uncertain not of herself, but of what came next. Then, with quiet, deliberate grace, she reached out and placed her hand on his chest, just above the heart. Not invitation, not transaction, just contact. His hand covered hers. And neither of them let go. Asterisk. Rain tapped gently against the canopy glass overhead. More whisper than storm tonight, more rhythm than threat. Inside the shelter, the quiet was a kind with warmth in it. Not the emptiness of a hollow room, but the settled stillness of something beginning to root. Calder crouched by a disassembled heating coil, guiding a filament through the casing with a salvaged voltage probe. Sparks glinted off his gloves in short, careful bursts. His jaw was tight with concentration, but his shoulders were looser than they'd been in weeks. Lei sat near him, cross-legged and barefoot, a small cloth pouch open on her lap, filled with bits of wire and copper. Her cheeks had color now. Her curls were soft and free again, not matted to her skull by fear or cold. She looked up at him, curious. What does that part do? She asked, pointing at the coil casing. Calder didn't answer right away. He held the probe steady until the arc settled, then leaned back slightly. Distributes heat without overloading the panel, he said. Keeps the shelter warm through the night. Lei nodded, understanding most of it. Want me to carry it? If you break it, he said seriously, you carry it forever. She grinned. That grin, brief, shy, full of newness, pulled something in his chest. From across the room. Nissari watched them with arms folded beneath her wrap. She'd washed earlier. Damp strands of silver-white hair clung to her collarbone, and her skin glowed in the heater's flicker. She didn't look tired, no. She looked thoughtful, like a woman observing something she hadn't dared to hope for. You're building something here, she said softly. Calder stood, brushing copper shavings from his pants. So are you. She stepped forward, slow and barefoot on the cold steel floor. I mean it, Calder. Before you, I was surviving minute by minute. I didn't know what it meant to belong anywhere, or to anyone. He touched her waist as she passed, just a thumb grazing the fabric. You do now. She nodded, the motion slow and heavy with emotion. Then she turned to Lei, who was stacking 2 drone cores like building blocks and whispering to herself. Before we found you, Isari said, my daughter didn't speak more than a word a day. Calder looked down, and now? Lei turned around. Her eyes were wide, her fingers curled into the hem of Calder's shirt, where it hung loosely around her. She walked toward him, tugging gently at his hand. Can I say something? She asked. He knelt instinctively, bringing himself to her level. Of course. Lei hesitated, then looked up at him with eyes full of fragile hope. I want to call you Dad now. Calder's throat clenched. His breath caught in a way it hadn't in years. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, Lei stepped into him and hugged him, not brief, not unsure. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head against his shoulder. I think you already are, she said. He held her, arms around her tiny frame, jaw tight. Heart thunderous. Behind them, Nizari stood motionless. One hand lifted slowly to her mouth. She didn't try to stop the tears. She let them fall. This wasn't survival anymore. This was life. That night, they didn't sleep in shifts. They slept together. The 3 of them, curled beneath the same blanket. Lei tucked between them like a secret kept safe. Calder's arm around them both. Nizari's fingers laced through his beneath. The fabric. No one stirred when the wind rose. No one flinched when the shelter creaked. Outside, the storm passed. But inside, for the first time in years, nothing cracked. Nothing was bartered. There was no longer a woman offering her body. No longer a man retreating into silence. No longer a child too afraid to speak. There was a mother, a father, and a daughter. And on Idris 9, that was everything. Asterisk, the morning didn't arrive in light, only in temperature. The air no longer bit at their skin. The heater had held through the night, its coil purring low beside the cot. Rain had stopped sometime in the early hours, and for once, the canopy glass above the shelter wasn't slick with runoff. It was just gray, unmoving, like the world was holding its breath. Calder stirred first. He didn't open his eyes right. Away, the warmth beneath the blanket was complete. Lei's small body curled against his chest. Nizari pressed into his side, her leg tangled loosely with his, one hand resting over his ribs. For a long moment, he didn't move. He simply listened to their breathing, to the hush of the shelter, to the silence that finally didn't feel haunted. When he did open his eyes, he found Nizari already watching him. Her silver hair was tousled. From sleep, her green skin still warm from shared heat. She didn't speak. She only smiled, a soft, private thing, like she knew they'd made it through something invisible. Still here, she said, voice husky. Calder's lips curved faintly. Good morning. It was the first time he'd said that in years. Lei stirred, wriggling in her sleep. Her small fingers clutched at the hem of Calder's shirt, like an anchor, then released. She blinked awake, rubbed at her eyes, and looked between the 2 of them. Can we eat? She asked. Calder sat up slowly, untangling himself from the blanket. I'll heat the pot. Nizari rolled onto her side, gathering Lei into her lap and brushing back her hair. Did you sleep well? Lei nodded and pressed her cheek into her mother's chest. You were warm, she said. By the time the ration stew was bubbling again, Calder had unpacked 2 bowls and cleaned the flatware with reheated water. Lei watched from the crate where she sat cross-legged, humming softly under her breath. Nizari stood behind them, her eyes tracing the contours of the room, not just the walls, but the space between the 3 of them. She walked to the hanging rack, reached for her wrap, then paused. Instead of dressing in it, she crossed the room barefoot, still wearing Calder's long-sleeved shirt cinched with twine at her waist. She knelt beside him, her eyes steady, voice low. "I used to think I had nothing left," she said. Calder didn't. "Turn. You have your daughter." "I do," she nodded. "But I also have myself again. I want to give that to someone now, not for food, not for safety." Her hand touched his shoulder. "For you, if you want it." Calder didn't answer. With words. He turned, leaned in, and kissed her. Gentle, brief, certain. Lay didn't look away. She didn't even flinch. She just smiled around the rim of her bowl. Later, they worked together. Nisari repaired one of the broken thermal sleeves with a stitch, so tight it looked factory-made. Calder rewired the overhead lamp with a panel Nisari had spotted in a collapsed alley. Lay helped fold linen strips and handed him tools with quiet precision. By dusk, the unit was humming, power drawn from solar backups, the heater holding steady, the air dry and still. That evening, after Lay had eaten and fallen asleep with her, small fingers wrapped around the edge of Calder's shirt again, Nisari stood at the window. The wrap she wore now was different, not the ragged cloth of a refugee, but something she'd remade, something she chose. Her hair brushed over her shoulder as she turned. "Are you still afraid of closeness?" she asked softly. Calder looked up from the corner where he'd been checking the coil charge. He didn't answer right away. She crossed to him slowly, her bare feet silent on the floor, and knelt beside him. "I'm not offering anything," she said. "Not trading, not asking. I just want to be next to someone. As myself." He met her eyes. "Then come here." She did. She slid into the space beside him, thigh to thigh, shoulder to chest. Her head nestled into the curve beneath his collarbone. Her breath was even, steady. Her hand touched his wrist. Calder exhaled. "You're still afraid," she whispered. "No," he said. "I'm remembering how not to be alone." She reached up, ran her fingers along his jaw. A pale scar traced down his neck. She kissed it once softly, slowly, not for comfort, for acknowledgement. They didn't move for a long time. Just sat together beneath the hum of the heater. Just were. Eventually, she pulled the blanket down from the cot, draped it over their legs, and leaned into him fully. His arms came around her waist, without thought. Their bodies didn't tremble anymore. Their silence didn't ache. Outside, the sky stayed dark. Inside, it was enough. Later that night, Calder woke briefly to find Nisari still asleep in his arms, her fingers lightly curled around his shirt. Lay had shifted, reaching across the mattress to rest her hand on her mother's side, a link of warmth, child to mother to man. Calder closed his eyes again, and for once, the dark felt like shelter, not erasure. When the storm passed again, it didn't touch them, because they were no longer surviving. They were home. The END